are again. It's always such a pleasure. Remember when you tried to kill me twice?
I'm Levi Weinhagen, and this is the Pratfalls podcast, a show that features conversations with artists about the work they make and the life they live. You can follow me on Twitter at @thatlevi. The website is pratfallspod.com. Before we get into this episode, I have a few thank yous / shout outs. A lot of awesome people posted new ratings and reviews on iTunes and helped the show get new listeners. So I want to say thank you to some of the reviewers: Saltenberg, Brian Beatty, Rachel Bo Bachel, Celeste St. Paul, Punsultant, Pablo Jones, Julie B72, Sir Laughs, A. Burks, Kevin T, Jen Lills, Jack Hardy, BK D Uno, Vox D Michelle, and Caitlin Mahahaha. I know a bunch of you folks. I really appreciate you posting reviews. It means a lot to me, and it means a lot to the podcast. This episode is my conversation with visual artist M Culver. She has wonderful work on display right now in Minneapolis at a gallery by Augsburg University. You guys can check it out. She'll tell you more about that in our conversation. And I really liked talking to Jam and listening to her talk about how she makes her work. I think you guys will dig it as well. So here is my conversation with M Culver.
I meant you. It would be funny if it weren't so sad.
And the first thing I always say is I'm talking to M Culver, right? Is that the right pronunciation?
Yes.
Culver. I immediately want to ask if you're related to the Culver restaurant people.
No, not at all. I always say I wish. And
yeah.
I've never even been to the Culver
You've never had a butter burger or whatever else they have?
No, I don't eat fast food. I'll have to try the custard sometime, though.
That's what I've never been there either, but I don't feel like I'm missing anything.
But a lot of times people have trouble pronouncing or spelling my last name.
Really?
And so I'll just say it's like the restaurant, and then it's just
very
easier.
clean and simple.
Yeah.
And you're a visual artist. That sort of seems like really cut and dry. Like you make a lot of sort of large scale canvas prints, or not prints, canvas pieces, very large, like full wall.
Large scale drawings on paper and paintings on canvas. I do some smaller and medium size works too. But no, I'm not a writer or talented with music or anything like that.
So you like to just be a visual artist, like that's really straightforward.
Yeah, I mean, I do technical writing with like my artist statements, press releases, that sort of thing. But I'm not a creative writer. I don't think I have much of a talent with that. I think more visual. And
was drawing, like, do you remember when you were small, like a young person? Were you drawing always, or do you remember what the creative things you were doing when you were like a kid?
Well, this is always like the answer that I think every artist says is that I've been drawing since I can hold a crayon. So basically that. I mean, I was an only child, and that's pretty much all I did. It was just drawing and painting. I remember like begging my mom to finger paint, and I'd make such a mess, so I'd have to beg her to like pull it out and do that. And I started oil painting when I was 13. And I sold my first painting for $20 at 13. So I was pretty excited about that.
How did you make a sale?
It was actually a family member.
Okay.
Which helped. But it was still a sale. So
yeah,
I think
totally.
It counts.
Yeah.
So,
did that mean you were a professional artist starting then? I'm curious about that sort of idea of professional versus amateur.
A professional artist at 13?
Yeah, I don't know.
Well, trying to be. I didn't know what a professional artist was.
Yeah.
You know, I didn't even know about art school, didn't know about any of that. But I had a Bob Ross kit my parents got me for either Christmas or
happy
birthday.
Little trees.
Yeah, and I had the turpentine, you know, it was really strong, so I had to go out on a picnic table, and I was doing the happy trees and the mountains, and I don't think it was bad for, you know, being 13.
Yeah. No, that's great.
And so I feel like I had a little bit of an advantage before going to college that I was already experimenting with oils and just, it wasn't even that muddy. It wasn't too bad, but just learning how to do the process and everything early on. And then working with acrylic, and I don't think I really worked with charcoal when I was younger, or even in high school. But you do
now.
Yeah. I learned how to work with charcoal in college, and the first time was it was a disaster. It was just like, how do you work with this? I hated it. I was like cursing at the charcoal. I'm like, I'm never going to do charcoal again. It was like my first drawing class.
It seems like it gets everywhere. Like
it does.
It's real messy medium, right?
Because I was used to, pencil.
Yeah.
And then with paint and everything, or mixing that. And charcoal, like the first time you grab it, you think it's going to be like a pencil, and then your hand smudges it, and it's just this big mess. And I think a lot of people like give up on it. And it took quite a bit of years to get used to it. And I sort of have my own weird process of working in layers with it, of erasing and redrawing and using Vine, pencil, powder charcoal, and then I use a lot of acrylic with it too. But I use it more in a way of like erasing areas, of kind of blocking it out instead of painting it in, and then kind of scratching into the surface.
So there's, I'm curious about like your whole schooling and everything, but you made me think of this, so I'm curious now. From the little bit of your work that I've been able to see, and mostly it's been through, I think, like online photos, which I know is not the ideal experience of, especially the size of the work you make. Yeah. I even think I heard you describe maybe in writing somewhere that you like when from a distance someone thinks there's a sort of very realistic image, and then as they get closer they can see the work, like the process of the work. And what that made me think of is, because your work is very personal, from far away people see you, the person, and then when they get closer they see the artist who made the work. And I think there's something interesting there. Okay. I don't know if that is...
I've never heard anybody say that before. It's interesting.
I don't know if that... Yeah, okay. Well, I was going to ask if there's any intentionality to that of... Because, the work, certainly the stuff you're showing right now is memories connected to childhood. That's stuff you've been working on a long time, or sort of personal... There's a relationship to personal relationships. That's very clunky.
Yeah.
So you're sort of showing who you are, but then when somebody gets up close to a piece, they can see like the physical you as well as the sort of mental, emotional you. And I don't know if I'm curious how.
Yeah.
If you want that to be the experience, or is that just what is?
I guess I haven't really consciously thought about it in that way. I did have someone I was talking to at my opening the other night that was saying, was talking about me having a private life, and but I'm kind of exposing myself in a vulnerable way through my work, and that you get to see into my private life. So I guess that kind of relates to what you're saying. But you're
picking what people see. At their angles, you get to give them here's this, but not.
But I'm not editing in a happy way.
No.
I think there's a range of emotion and different experiences in the work, and I want to show that, and I don't want to edit that out and only show these good experiences, happy experiences. Although I don't think anything's necessarily a bad experience. It is what it is.
Do you think that broadly about life? There's no bad experiences?
It's kind of, I think when I was younger, it's you focus more on everything's good or everything's bad. And you have to have the sense of mindfulness and think about things be in the present, and think about things in a neutral way. And it's I also went to therapy a lot when I was younger, so you can tell that's where that comes from. And it helped a lot with my art and with everything, of being okay, well, even if it's a bad situation, if it's good, you don't want to get too excited about things either and have a big ego about things, because eventually you're going to get a rejection and it's going to be a big blow. So, you've got to be grounded. But with things that are negative too, it's really it's not negative. Things are neutral, and just living in the moment and not thinking too much about the past and those regrets that we have, and worrying about the future, although it's really hard not to always be worrying about the future. But it's just kind of bringing yourself back to the present, and I see that with the past experiences too. I don't like to think about things as being good or negative, if that makes sense.
Oh, totally, yeah.
It is what it is, and it's I didn't have a perfect childhood. I had parents that loved me and stuff, and I had to deal a lot with mental illness with my grandfather, other things, other struggles in my family. But I don't see it as a bad thing. I mean, it was my life, it was my experience. And I feel like using my own experiences, even though, I mean, it's personal work, but I feel like it's universal and people can relate to it. And now I forgot what I was saying. Can edit that little section.
No, never. Well, no, but so the personal thing is really interesting to me because one of my challenges when I was thinking about coming to talk to you is I want to talk about your work and how you work and not make it about me. That's sort of one of my objectives always in these conversations. But when some of the work that I've seen of yours totally resonates to me in a way where it becomes very personalized, and then I just want to say like, hey, I take medicine for my anxiety and I've done some work with people with dementia and I saw a bunch of echoes of that work in your work. But that's about my experience, not about your experience, which I think is like, that's great. That means you're creating stuff that is specific to you but resonates with a broader audience.
And I always think it's always difficult to create personal work that can resonate with the audience. It's like a lot of people create personal work and they're so involved with it being their story, and a lot of people just can't relate to it at all. And so I mean, initially I'm creating the work for myself. I mean, you have to as an artist, and it's
because no one else cares at first.
Yeah, I mean, you have to care about it, and it's cathartic, for me, the whole process, and to be able to deal with these emotions and experiences and everything. But I'm also able to step back and I think about my audience and how they're going to relate to it. And I don't want like the stories, the narratives to be like too literal. And I think that's a problem with personal work too. It's too literal, it's too personal. And I've met some artists in the past that have done personal work, and you ask them questions or constructive criticism, and their response is, well, you didn't live this life, or you didn't have this experience, so you just don't get it, and they get kind of defensive about it. And so I don't want my work to be like that, where it's so personal. It's like I don't want to talk about it, and it's mine, and that sort of thing. What's interesting is that over the years, as I've shared these pieces, is that I have a really good response from the audience, is that people from all different types of backgrounds, different ages, they've come up to me during my openings and they start sharing their own stories. And so I think in that way it is universal, and it's interesting because sometimes it's happy experiences and stories of their childhood. Some people discuss mental illness or depression, things in their family, and I've had some people that have cried in front of my work too, but not in like a depressed way, but it just really resonated with them, and they felt like just a lot of emotion with it. And actually my guest book, I read one of the first few lines of the guest book when I was finishing installing some students. I guess had already come in to the solo show, and one of them had written that they cried when they saw one of the paintings. And then another person wrote, they're like, it made me feel very uncomfortable. So I don't know if that was in a good way or a bad way, but either way, it's interesting how people experience the work.
Well, it made me feel is great.
Yeah.
Like that, whatever the end of that sentence is, it made me feel is sort of like the thing, right?
Yeah.
I'm curious because, so you have a bunch of work you've made that's around schizophrenia and having grown up with a grandfather who was living with schizophrenia and I think some other probably mental health issues as well. And that is, you're telling parts of your story of childhood and that experience, but you're also representing things connected to other people in your family. Have you had any difficult conversations with parents or other people about making private things somewhat public? Is there any,
You mean just like in a family?
Yeah, have you had anyone express sort of discomfort with, hey, these are our stories and you're putting them on literally on display? Or even you're selling versions of those stories, and I think that can make. You mean
literally selling, or
you're selling. Well, both, but you're putting something up in a gallery, and people are buying your work, so you're like sort of selling family stories just because that is, I mean, I think
Yes.
that's what all artists do. We're all really sharing ourselves and our family stories and whatever our medium is.
Yeah.
Sometimes it's
But I
quite
think mine's
clear.
a- yeah,
yours
mine's-
is like on
Mine's
the,
pretty specific.
Right.
Yeah.
so is I mean, did you worry about that? Do you worry about that? Do you get
No, I don't worry
feedback?
about it because I haven't I haven't had a bad response from anyone in my family. But some people my parents are supportive of my work and they're proud of the work, and they actually like that I'm representing my grandfather as sort of like a dedication to him and the family. So I don't think they see it in a negative way. Now, other people in the family that I don't talk to very often, some of them don't really know much about art. So who knows what...
they may not be aware even that...
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of like, some family and friends that aren't really into art in the past, before I was even doing these series, would suggest, like, you should just paint cars and, paint pretty pictures and this sort of thing. So, I don't know. I mean, no one's voiced any concern in my family. I think I'm showing a range of emotion and different things, but I don't see it as being negative. I mean, it's like a dedication to his life. I mean, it's telling the story.
Yeah.
And everybody has, these different facets of, whether they have mental illness or not. It's just part of sharing the story. So I think in a way, it is a dedication, I think.
Yeah,
and there's
absolutely.
nothing wrong with, there's so many people who have mental illness and anxiety. I have an anxiety disorder. And I'm used to dealing with it now. And I think it's part of being an artist too. A lot of us have anxiety. And
there's something I think really great to be said about having that stuff be more public, because that is still one of those weirdly stigmatized areas. So not just a dedication to your grandfather, but that being sort of a work of advocacy as well.
Oh yeah, but I was saying dedication more
I know what you mean,
with the family, is that they kind of view it in that way, and they don't, as far as I know, they don't have any issues of me talking about schizophrenia, because a lot of people just don't understand. They're scared of people with schizophrenia. They're uncomfortable. They think that they're violent when really they're not. And with the stigma with it, I feel like it's something important to talk about with your work. I try not to get like overly political with my work. It's like
not preachy.
if I have in-depth conversations, private conversations, I can get more into details about the stories. But I don't feel like it's preachy in that way, but I think a lot of people can connect, because most people, they may not have someone in their family that has schizophrenia, but everybody has somebody in their family that's dealing with anxiety or depression, PTSD. There's especially people who are, like, my grandfather was in the Army, so a lot of people who have been in the Army are family members, have dealt with a lot of issues like that, and I think that's how people can connect with it.
Yeah, that's a huge ongoing issue right now.
Yeah. And I'm very careful with how I represent it, because I don't want it to be this dark, scary sort of thing. Even if it's a narrative that's about, I wouldn't say something scary. I'm trying to find like the word for it. Just something that's maybe a little bit darker, of the story.
Well, I do think there's sort of a general fear of mental illness, like not only not understanding it, but people are worried it's like something that still could happen to them. I think we have this complicated relationship with something like schizophrenia of like, am I going to wake up one day and be schizophrenic?
Well, and it can.
I know, but I think that
predisposition.
I think that's the dark part for a lot of people.
Yeah, and I believe it's with women can develop schizophrenia more in their 30s, and men is more around the age of 17 to like early 20s, which is interesting because my grandfather enlisted in the Army when he was 17. He just lied and said he was 18, and they didn't check anything, and back then, and it makes me wonder if like these these triggers when he went to war, actually. Like, he already had a predisposition for schizophrenia, and maybe if he never went to war, maybe it would have never developed or to that level. So I find that interesting. But I don't have a fear of developing, schizophrenia. But I think a lot of people have a fear of developing any sort of mental illness, like you said.
Yeah, I mean, we just are afraid of aging too. But
oh yeah, yes. I have a fear of aging, and death and all of those things.
Yeah, the future.
Yeah.
I'm curious. You've got a fine arts degree. Is
yes,
that true? And you're a working artist. And
full-time professional working artist.
Right.
So, yes.
So that. I think it's changing a lot, but that has long been viewed as a very risky undertaking, particularly from like a financial stability standpoint. But also, there's a bunch of other elements. You're inevitably putting yourself in your work, and there's things that come as a result of that. So I know there is this long history of like parents, you're like, I'm going to go to art school and get a degree to be a professional artist. That can be a challenging or sort of an uncertain landscape to traverse. And then to be an artist as well, to just be a working artist, is you're doing a ton of administrative work that you didn't, when you're like, I want to be an artist, it usually means I want to make my art more than it means I want to update my website and send out press releases and send out mailings and things.
Yeah, you get a reality check when you graduate from college.
Well,
Huge reality check.
And a bill. So I'm curious about the decisions, like the thoughts that went into you deciding to get a fine arts degree, knowing you wanted to be an artist making work as opposed to like teaching art. Where
are you talking about when I was younger, before college, or after college, or during college?
All of it, any of that time, frankly. I'm curious about your decision to, before going, like as you were going into college, did you know I want to be a professional artist and this is a path that makes sense? And then, as you finished college, did it feel like I have the tools I need to make the work? And I also, there's plenty of people who are professional artists who don't get a fine arts degree. And then there are lots of people who do. And I think there's a lot of interesting conversations happening about that schooling and what, do you need that formalized training? There can be debt sometimes that affects the decisions you make as an artist, whether or not to sell certain things or make certain versions of your work, making prints of your work to try to cover debt. So, there's a lot of different conversations there. So I'm just curious how you think about that stuff.
Well, first of all, I haven't met many artists that don't have a fine arts degree. It seems that now there's a push for, a higher degree. It's where you've got to have your PhD now in fine art, which I think is ridiculous.
Yeah, does that help with getting a gallery to show your work?
I think maybe if you want to be a professor that it gives you more credibility, but I think it's one of the things of where students are going, from their BFA to their master's to the PhD because they just want to be a professional student. And you can put off paying off those loans and you can just keep going to school, but the problem is eventually you need to stop and just have your career. I mean, if you need a PhD for art history or something.
Yeah.
But for fine art, I think it's a little too much, and I think that universities and schools are just taking advantage for the PhD.
Yeah.
There's no point in that. But it would be, I thought about it one time when I was younger, it'd be really nice to call myself Dr. M Culver.
But you could do that anyways.
Yeah, but then I could give random advice on anything because I would be a doctor.
I feel like you could pull that off now anyways. Just give people advice.
Yeah. But I wouldn't have the doctor title.
It's true.
Yeah. So that would be the only point, just to give
random advice.
Yeah, call myself doctor.
That's expensive for just that goal.
Yeah, it's not worth it.
Just going up to people in the grocery store or something and saying, hey, you know what you should do? I'm a doctor. Trust me.
Yeah, it would be fun though.
I'm
going back to
okay. Go ahead.
When I was growing up, I didn't know about art school. I didn't know much about college. I grew up pretty poor in an army town, where
so braggy. Why are you bragging?
Where I think like back then too, it was before, well, I guess the internet existed, but I started high school in like 1994, so I didn't have a computer or anything back then, and so I wasn't aware of what was going on in the art world, art degrees, any sort of career in the arts.
What did you think of when you thought of like art? Did that mean something to you?
I just started
when you were like 12, 13?
I think when I was really young, both my parents liked creating art, not professionally, but they spent a lot of time drawing with me. Mm-hmm. And my mom did that quite a bit, but my dad was always doing like these doodly caricatures on napkins, on everything. And so I would grab it, and I wanted to be as good as him, even though there's these goofy things. And so I would go off to my room, and I'd copy it for hours, and just hours until I looked exactly like his little doodles. Mm-hmm. And I think that inspired me, and they encouraged me with it. And I won all these little cute awards as a kid. It's like, whenever you're in elementary school, there's always one or two kids that are good at art, and so you win the little awards. And then I remember the other students had like ripped up my drawings, and I would get mad, but it kind of created this fire to like be better, and I'm like, okay, well, I'm just going to make a better one. And I would make a better one. If it got ripped up again, I was like, I'll do another one. But growing up, so I grew up in Fayetteville, North Carolina, near Fort Bragg. And in high school, it was a bad high school. I don't want to really get into that. Let's just say very bad high school. And that experience, though, definitely made me want to get out of there and move to a bigger city. But at the time, I still wasn't aware of art schools because being in the Army town, we had recruiters that would just stand there. I don't know if it's even legal now. Maybe it is still there, but they would stand there, and every time you walk by, they would solicit you and try to get you to join the Army. And the other thing they pushed is that they would come in and try to encourage us to go to community college to like become a nurse. And that's kind of it. Or get married, marry a GI, and live in some trailer and have like 10 kids or something. And it was like, I don't want to do those things, but I don't know what to do. Because, you have no family money. It's like you just think college is just something you can't do, you can't go to. And then I ended up getting like a cheap computer, I think when I was 16 or 17. And I found colleges, and I started looking up, and I ordered the catalogs because they didn't have the information online back then. And I did have an art instructor in high school that told me I should be a graphic designer. And so I thought, yes, I should be a graphic designer. I didn't even know really what it was. She didn't tell me there was an option of being a fine artist, but she's like, you'd be really good at this. And so that's when I started looking into colleges. And so I got all the catalogs, and I would just spend hours looking, but I still didn't know if I could do it. But then as soon as I graduated when I was like 17 in high school, and then within a few months I just moved to Minnesota because I was looking at the Minneapolis College of Art and Design. And I didn't quite have a portfolio ready. I didn't have the money. I barely had any money when I got here. So I worked retail for 2 years. Which I thought was a waste of time, but I learned how to sell. I learned how to work with very difficult people because I sold, I worked mainly in like the stationery and pen department, and it was Dayton's, now it's Macy's. And was selling these $500 Mont Blanc pens. And you can imagine how some of the customers were. And they were a little difficult sometimes. And then I also... Similar
to fine art customers, really.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, depending, but...
I have a lot of great collectors.
Yeah, I don't mean to slam your...
work with. No. And then I also a few times worked in like a health and beauty section where I sold gum. So I mean, I worked with like so many different levels, so many different types of people that it just really helped, I think, to, I had so much anxiety. I was so nervous my first job, and a lot of mean customers. I don't have that with collectors at all. They're very pleasant. But just learning how to talk about products and demonstrate things and, just talk about selling. So it's something I never thought, I just thought it was a regular job and it didn't pay very well, but it was definitely a good choice to do that. I saved up money, not enough money to pay for college, but I saved up a little bit of money, to move into the dorm. And I applied to MCAD, and
were you making work those 2 years as well?
Yeah, I mean, it was mediocre. I think, I guess okay for my age at the time. And I think I started college when I was maybe 20 years old. And I created a decent portfolio, I think. Looking back, I kind of cringe a little bit at it, but
well, that implies growth, right? It would be kind of sad if you looked back and you're like, "That was my best work."
Yeah, and I sold a lot of those pieces actually so back then, so it's good. And I was accepted at MCAD, and I received a scholarship right away, one of the merit scholarships and some other ones that were financial need ones. And then they told me, they're like, we can give you a larger scholarship if you come back with some more work. And so I worked a little bit harder, a couple more weeks, brought more work, got a bigger scholarship. And did have to take out some loans too. But each year I just worked really hard to get the merit scholarships. I really needed it. And I think that when you come from a background where you have struggle and you have to work hard for things, you have that drive. And it's like, it's still, whether, even if I have like a bunch of big sales, like right now, I still have that drive to because I never want to go back to like living in like an army town. Not that it's going to happen, but it's kind of like
it's a good motivator. Yeah,
you definitely feel motivated with it. And then let's see, when I applied to MCAD, it was for painting, drawing, and sculpture. So I had decided to go into fine art. Once I saw it, I was looking at the graphic design just because it was suggested, and I was like, no. I think I have an okay eye for design, but I don't think I have like a good talent, and it's just not my thing. I changed my degree to painting because the sculpture program was focused a little bit more on furniture at the time, and wood and metal, which I'm not good at. I wanted to do more figurative sculpture, but they didn't have the professors at the time for that. And I think you can do that later on, but the first couple of years is focused more on doing like the furniture stuff, and my tables were all like wobbly, and I tried to say it was intentional.
Yeah.
It's not supposed to be functional at
got
all.
Character and charm.
It's supposed to wobble, or I would be like, you present it to the class, and I'm like, just don't sit on it. It looks good, but it's a little. So I changed it to painting, and I miss sculpture, so I'd like to get back into it. But
well, and you do a lot of layering of your work. Like
it has a sculpture quality.
And you scrape and you pull away, and that it seems like you found little ways to bring that, like the enjoyment of sculpture into drawing and painting.
But I definitely would like to get back to do like full sculpture, three-dimensional. So maybe that'll be a project. And installation too. I was like, sometimes you just get too many ideas and you want to do a little bit of everything, but I'll get there.
Well, so what
was the other part of the question?
It doesn't matter, but that too many ideas thing is really interesting to me. But all of that sort of journey you just described, that's pretty bold. That you just up and moved to a town, or a big city. You hadn't spent a lot of time there, and you weren't going. You were going for school, but it's not like you were going because you were signed up and ready to go to school. And I can see the part of the push motivation of getting away from something. I totally have that. Like all of the decisions I made in my like teens and 20s were me going like, I don't want to be, like I grew up. I don't want to be like my absentee father. So just like it impacted every choice. I can look back and be like, oh, that was just me running away from not wanting to be that thing. But do you have an internal confidence, do you think, of I can just work hard and I can do a thing? Like, is that a thing you've identified in yourself?
Can you rephrase that? Like, so you're basically just asking if I have confidence.
Kind of, yeah. I mean, if you have confidence. That's not really my question.
So
I guess my question is, can you pinpoint where that comes from? Is it intrinsic, or did you have to work to develop it? I don't know. I'm impressed by it. So I'm trying to figure out the sort of like...
I have insecurities.
Well,
I have...
Sure. Yeah, I'm not saying you're...
oh, yeah. I mean, I'm kind of the, back and forth. But no, I mean, you have to have confidence. Mm-hmm. I mean, and I say with artists, we have to have some bit of an ego. Yeah, no one makes stuff and says, hey, look what I made, without some level of ego. Yeah, but to be humble, down to earth, and, and I get tons of rejections, too. So it's like, sometimes I get lucky and I'll get a few things in a row, and then it's like... I mean, most of the artists, I mean, it doesn't even matter what level you are. Well, unless you're at the very top.
They get rejections too.
Yeah, I guess they don't seem like it happens.
No.
Yeah, I'm sure. But
because I mean, you've I'm sure experienced this. If you have some success, you just push forward what success means.
You'll eventually get something.
But you'll keep pushing to like.
Yeah.
Like right now, you just said, "Oh, I'd love to do sculpture too." Rather than everything's working great, I have no interest in sort of doing even more things or growing even more.
Well, like you have to grow. There's
because you're not really satisfiable, right? Like,
well, nothing's ever good enough.
Exactly.
It's true. It's like I'm not saying I don't like my work.
Right.
I do like my work, but it can always be better.
Right.
So you always have to grow as an artist. I do have confidence. I mean, you have to have confidence to keep going, but sometimes you feel discouraged. You have those days where you're like, not that I want to quit doing art or anything, but you feel discouraged. Days I want to quit doing art. I don't want to ever quit, but you feel a little discouraged. Yeah. But at this point, I've been doing it for so long. I'm so used to rejections that. The first few rejections when I was younger, I cried, and it was like the end of the world sort of feeling, and nobody likes me, nobody likes my work. And now it's like, I'll get kind of like bummed, kind of like little frowny face, a little sad for like a couple hours, and then sometimes I just forget about, unless it's something major, like when I was applying to grad school and I, didn't get into like Yale, which I knew I wasn't going to get into anyway. But then you're like really bummed out. But I always just try to remind myself of like, okay, I didn't get this one, but I'll get the next one. But if I don't get the next one, maybe I'll get 10 more tries. I will eventually get something. But I think, I don't know, confidence in terms of like, from when I was younger, you mean? Where I don't know. From that?
I don't know.
I think it's just struggling with things and having like that adversity and feeling like you just have to work really hard to get somewhere. And my family was supportive, but I think that like the school I went to and the environment and people pushing you to go into the army and, oh, you're poor, you can't do this. And I think that I had this attitude of, it made me angry, and I was like, I'm going to show you, I'm going to do something. And I think a lot of things in the beginning, it's not like that now, but when I was very young was just driven by that anger of like, I'm going to do something with my life. And even to people that weren't important or anything, it's like, I'm talking about like students.
Oh, I know,
I went to school with.
I'll show you. I'll show all of you.
I just had this feeling of like, I can do something better with my life. And so, that drove me to get into college. I was like, I'm going to get in college. Because my parents didn't get a chance to go to college. And on my dad's side of the family, we do have some people that are teachers that have PhDs and masters and stuff, but a lot of people on my mom's side of the family didn't go to college. Some didn't want to, and I think some it's like, financially. But confidence now, I would say I'm not driven by anger anymore, but I think that's sort of the teenage angst sort of thing too, and the environment. Now it's more like I feel like the clock is ticking. The clock is just tick tock, tick tock. It's like gotta keep moving. And I mean, I'm still relatively young, but you see these artists that are like 21 that are, moving forward, and so it's like sometimes that motivates me too. I'm like, even though I'm further along than some of them. But
Sure.
But I feel like it feels like the clock is ticking, and like you were talking about, kind of fear of death and growing older. And I think there's that pressure. I think definitely once you get out of your 20s, there's the pressure of like moving the career forward.
Yeah, there seems to be like a feeling of less room to screw around. Like you need to be intentional about what you're doing when you get to be like real adult life. Yeah. So you do some really big stuff, like 8, 12, 13 feet high drawing things. And so things, I don't know. Well, they're not they're drawings, they're not paintings, figures. What should I call an object that you make? Because for me, I can say like a show.
No, it's fine.
Like
you
it's
said
really cut
that.
and dry.
I was just.
No, I think it's a hard thing.
I kind of go back and forth with some of my work, calling it drawings, some paintings. The most recent work I'm calling paintings, but it does have drawing elements in it. The black and white pieces that have a lot of charcoal. I mean, they have acrylics, so they border in between. But I don't call them mixed media because it's kind of vague.
Yeah.
With some of my smaller works, mixed media usually means like 5 or 6 different, things that I'm
like more
up and
collage-ish.
Yeah, but even my paintings and drawings have like a collage approach. I think not actually pasting things, but with reference material of piecing things together.
So collage of sort of influences as well, like ideas. Well, what I was now I want to say your art. When I want to ask you about your art things, is with that size, you have to actually move around a lot. Painting, visual art, in my experience and people I've talked to, can often be like really isolating and stationary. You're like staying in one place. You're using your arms and your shoulders.
The easel painters.
Yeah, you're just in one place a lot, and you're really the place I think you're in is your head, and so you sometimes even get a little bit disconnected from your body. And it seems like in your work, you put a lot of movement in what are still figures, and I wonder if that's influenced by the fact that you're moving a fair amount in making the actual things. Like, how much are you thinking about your connection of your brain and your body in the relationship to the sort of figure work that you're making on the page? Does that make sense?
In terms of me moving around?
I don't know.
You lost me on the last sentence.
I'm curious if how much you need to move around in working on your canvases influences the way that you put life into the figures.
Like intentionally influences, or?
Yeah, unless you want to sort of dig up some subconscious stuff that you're not even aware of. I'm always game for that.
I don't think it's really intentional. Like I'm thinking, I'm moving around, so it's going to have this energy. It's just part of my process. I pin the work up to the wall, and I'm standing. I'm on ladders. I have a scaffold now that I'm getting used to. I feel a little.
Are you more...
A little wavy on that, but...
Can you quantify if you're more mentally or physically worn out after working for a few hours? Do you feel...
Both, but more, I would say, mentally. I'm used to standing. That was the great thing about going to MCAD is as soon as we had our first studio class, they're like, you can't sit down. You have to stand for the 5 hours. And at the time, 5 hours seemed like a long time. And now I can stand, 10 hours, 15 hours. I've done longer. And I don't really even notice. I do have some back pain issues. I have some issues with that doesn't have to do with painting. So I do feel that sometimes. But, when you're so immersed in your work, you don't even feel the pain of your ankles or your feet until after, and then you notice you've got some swelling and calluses and blisters. But I'm so focused on what I'm doing that I think it's more of mental exhaustion, and you're just thinking so hard, and you're just kind of lost in it. And a lot of times I'm actually dancing around when I'm painting. If I have my music on, I have energy with it, and even without the music, it's but even if I'm not dancing, it's when you're working on a really large piece, it goes all the way down to the ground, and so you have to crouch down, and you're working, even though I don't have a lot of control of my left hand, which I like sometimes to use like an eraser, so I don't have as much control. So I can work with both hands when I get really involved with it. And so you're going down on the ground on your knees, and then you're standing, and then you grab the ladder, and you just keep going at it, and so you get the energy from it, but I'm not thinking about creating energy. It's just part of the process and what happens. And it's interesting because however I'm feeling at the moment, if I'm feeling anxious, or even if I have depression, or if I'm feeling really manic, I think it comes through. And a lot of times the expression on the face, whether it's my grandfather or another figure, when I look back at it, it reminds me of the emotion I had at the time. It just comes through.
I like that. I'm also curious about, because you have so many like your personal elements in your work, do you think of the experiences you're having now and how they will maybe be in future work? So you've got a bunch of, you've got your versions of your grandfather, and then versions of your younger self in a bunch of your work.
The older work.
Right, some of the older work. Yeah, what's more prominent in the current showing?
Well, first of all, the older work was dealing with childhood memories of my relationship with my grandfather. So I'm present in pretty much all of those pieces. With the new work, it's about secondary memories, recreating secondary memories, and generational storytelling. So I wanted to remove myself completely from the work. And it's about my grandfather's stories, and then some of the discrepancies of what he told me and what he told other family members. And so I'm doing different versions and kind of combining that. But I felt like I've been working on the series for quite a while, but I'm branching off, and I thought it was important to remove myself from the new work.
So with that distance, do you feel like is it changing the way you're learning about yourself and how you think as you sort of create this work? Do you, because I'm guessing there's a certain amount of unpacking your own relationship to the past, and the idea that one person hears one version of a story and another person hears another version of the story. Some of that is probably how your grandfather presented different versions of stories to different people, but some of it is sort of the nature of memory and storytelling and how things change over time. We don't even realize that we sort of codify a memory, and that is now fact, even though that's not even what we were told 10 years ago, like that.
Well, I don't know if he actually changed any stories. I think it's just that, two people or more can be present or hear the same story, but they have a different experience and interpretation, and then memories just change. Yeah. And so even though, like, if two people are there and they have the same experience, really they didn't have the same experience, because even if you're not dealing with mental illness and that being in a story, it's like people have a different emotional reaction to things and interpret experiences
just normal
differently.
Day-to-day stuff. Yeah.
So
that awareness, does that...
So it's interesting and both are valid, both are real. It happened, the person experienced it. Right. But specific to my grandfather's stories is like what is reality and what is fantasy with schizophrenia, what's been skewed.
But so that, I'm curious if that awareness of how that same experience is different for two different people, and you think about that a lot because of the stuff you're making. Yeah. So what do you do if you're just in a social situation? Do you feel like you have to try not to be aware of how, I'm experiencing this differently than that person who is right next to me, who's in this sort of same exact situation?
Like now?
Yeah, right now we're having a shared experience, but who knows how we would report it back after the fact. Because you talked about being sort of present, but you're dealing a lot with the past, and so that can help you remember to stay present.
I think it's something more of when I'm reflecting on the past. So like our conversation now, it's like I'm not going
What's it
to
gonna
think
look
about
like later?
tomorrow and then be like, how did we experience this? I think
Yeah.
maybe in 5 years I would probably look back
Mm-hmm.
and then think about it, but like it's too soon maybe.
Yeah. You don't want to.
And, I mean,
We
it's-
could deconstruct it right now.
Yeah. And this is a new body of work too, so I'm still working out these ideas.
Yeah.
And for these paintings, for my grant project and the solo show, I mean, it's a cohesive body of work, but each piece is very different. Because I wanted to create, well, there's 11 pieces in the show, but 8 are large. And I wanted to find a different way and new perspectives for the storytelling with different color and composition and everything. So I feel like there's a lot more to explore, like with each piece, because I jumped around a little bit. When normally I would create a piece and then I want to do 10 more related to that story and do all these different versions. So that's my plan, is I want to do more versions of each piece and see where it goes. Because I just started having more ideas and I was like, oh, I really want to do more of this. But wait, I've got to move to this next painting for this. So it was a little bit different, this project.
I'm curious if you can think of a time when you were working on something and something you did didn't work out how you wanted it to, but then that ended up being sort of informing the final product.
That happens all the
In a
time.
positive way.
So,
Is there any one that's prominent, or have you had a series change shape based on, oh, I did this, but I thought this would happen, and instead this other thing happened?
that's with everything. I would say everything, because
Every time.
I don't like to do specific sketches and plan everything in detail before I work on a large piece. Like I do a lot of writing, a lot of research, and then sometimes my sketches look like little stick figures because it's more about the composition. And then I want to have like this honest response, on the canvas. And now I forgot what I was saying. Damn it.
Things changing based on something not going how you thought, or reacting to in the moment. I mean, it sounds
Yes, so that's what it was. So when I start a piece, I have the idea, I have the concept of where I want to go with it. I have my reference images that I piece together, but as I'm working, it just kind of organically grows, and it can change, and it can go in a different direction. And sometimes you have these happy accidents with mark making, and you step back and you think about it and you're like, okay, does this work? Does this not work? And sometimes you have to turn a painting around for a little while.
just forget about it.
Well, it's a
Try to
love-hate
forget about it.
relationship with your work. So I feel like sometimes artists, we can overwork things and we overanalyze things too much and just criticize it. So if you can just turn it around and work on multiple pieces at the same time, you can come back and you look at it and you're like, well, I was just being crazy. It was like, it looks fine. There's nothing wrong. It may not be perfect, but it's, it's not awful. And I feel like it's better, if you're not completely happy with a piece, it's better just to start another version than to keep going into it, and you're just going to kill it if you just keep overworking. It's not going to be fresh anymore.
Yeah, you're just trying to fix something you're not into.
But all my work changes from the original idea, and I think that's the good thing about not planning it too much and like having a sketch and then copying that.
So it's almost like you're sort of an improvisational painter.
Yeah, I would say things are not completely, I wouldn't say, because, I think a lot about the conceptual side of it. I feel like it's very important for my work to be like conceptually, technically, and aesthetically strong, but there's an intuitive, part of it that happens more in the middle of the process.
And you let that take over.
I do. And then sometimes with the figurative pieces, I'll start with one figure, and I'll step back and I'll see how that's working, and then I'll continue with the idea I have, but it can sometimes change, because originally I would think, well, I'm going to place this other figure here, or this is going to be the narrative. But once I step back, I'm like, no, it seems like this other thing would work better. And then it just kind of builds, and sometimes it turns into a slightly different narrative, or maybe the same narrative, but just a different way of presenting it.
This is a weird question I just now thought of, and you may not have any answer for it at all. Is there something you consume, some art or cultural thing that you consume that has informed or informs your work that you think might surprise people? Like, I watched Buffy the Vampire Slayer, and that really played a role in my work or something.
So something obscure that's not...
It doesn't have to be obscure. I mean, I just, I think that for people thinking about what a painter is informed by, it's other painters and their personal lives. And
okay.
So I'm curious if there's anything top of mind for you that's like, oh, well, there's this thing that I read this book and it changed how I thought about something, or there's this kind of music that you probably wouldn't think I was listening to while I was making this work.
Well, in terms of music, I listen to a little bit of everything, so it's I'm not. Well, I guess maybe music does influence the work a little bit.
If you're playing while you're making.
So I mean, like some contemporary classical music to Dirty South hip hop, which a lot of people are surprised, but I'm from the Dirty South.
That's right, and it's good stuff.
Yeah, and let's say some industrial pop music, even a little Dolly Parton, a little bit of everything in there. So it just depends on my mood, and I think it probably does have some influence on the work. I do read a lot. I have lots of art books, huge collection in my studio.
What do you read that's not an art book?
Steve Martin, everything Steve Martin. I have an obsession with Steve Martin. Like, if you see on my social media, I try not to go overboard with it. But Steve Martin movies, his stand-up. I have his fiction books. I haven't been to one of his concerts yet with the banjo. I hope to. But like reading his quotes and the humor, and some of his interviews are just really amazing. It's just,
and his memoir is amazing too.
I have that. And just hearing about how he had a fake confidence, in the beginning. So I think that's a huge influence. And then I read a lot of business books, just things on being an entrepreneur, marketing. I know it doesn't sound that exciting, but
it's really important.
So I read those articles every day. I'm always reading that. And even kind of self-help books, not the cheesy ones, but ones that are more business sort of oriented. And vintage photography, I like vintage photography. Other books that I have, medical books, things on surgery, some of my older work.
You had surgical. That's dark.
So I'm still interested. I think it was because there's been a lot of sickness in my family, and my my grandfather had died of lung cancer, and my grandmother had a lot of health issues before she died, and so I spent a lot of time visiting in the hospital, and so just hospitals and surgery and things kind of came into some of my earlier work. I didn't mean for it to be like shock value or anything like that, but it was just kind of a way of like processing that and kind of finding the beauty in that. And so I still like to read a lot of books about that and books on mental illness. And I'm trying to think if there's anything else.
That's a lot of stuff. I didn't know if you'd have any.
Movies, of course, art documentaries, independent films, like a lot of dramas, dark comedies.
And Steve Martin, as you mentioned.
Anything Steve Martin. Yes, I always say Steve Martin's my man.
He's a good man to have. Yeah.
And I'm always trying to tweet him, but he hasn't responded yet because I'm not clever. I'm not clever enough to get his attention. I have to come up with something. I'm just not. I'm too boring.
You have to put him in one of your one of your pieces?
I was thinking, I don't like to do celebrity portraits, but maybe if I do...
Don't do him as a celebrity, just as Steve Martin, the artist.
But you know, Eric Fischel is friends with Steve Martin, and he's in a lot of his paintings, and Steve Martin loves art, so maybe...
Something.
All I want is a little like tweet that says, hi, I'll
That's
be
all.
happy.
No big deal.
I don't know, I guess those are
Those are
that's
great.
all I can think about.
That's
but-
plenty. I would like to
Right.
do a public call to have anyone help get Steve Martin to tweet at M Culver. That's
Good.
I'm going to try
I'll
and get
make my
that
day.
project going.
Or for him to hold a sign with
Yeah,
me.
yeah. That's it. On a late night talk show.
That's asking
That's
too
a big
much.
ask. Yeah. Let's just go with the tweet. It doesn't have to be your name on a sign.
Fine, I'll take the tweet.
So we've been talking for about an hour. Where should people go to see your work, to see where they can see your work, to get a hold of you? Where are the internet places that you exist?
My website is jmculver.com. I can spell that, jmculver.com.
Like a restaurant.
Yes. And on my website, you'll find links for my Facebook, my Twitter, Instagram. I have a bunch of videos on Vimeo. They're also on YouTube. And I have a newsletter, so it's great to sign up for that. I don't spam anyone. I just send out for, important events. And I think, that's it. So, and then my current exhibition is called Where Back When, and that's at Gage Gallery at Augsburg. That's it runs until March 23rd, and they're open 7 days a week, so there's plenty of time to stop by for that. And then I have the behind-the-scenes video also playing there in the gallery, and that'll eventually be on my website. And then the next event won't be until May 20th, and that's the Christie's auction at MCAD, and I'll have a piece there.
Cool. That's awesome.
So that's what's coming up, and starting a commission tomorrow.
Wow.
So staying busy.
Great. Well, thanks for talking to me, Jamie. I
Yeah,
appreciate
thanks
it.
so much.
Well, here we are again. It's always such a pleasure. Remember when you tried to kill me twice? And how we laughed and laughed, except I wasn't laughing. Under the circumstances, I've been shockingly nice. You want your freedom, take it. That's what